Greetings, Culture. This is Jeff Vieira, author of Culture is Everything, and your host for this latest dispatch from the front. How would you like to go on a cruise right about now? Or maybe to Vegas? Seems like a pretty good thing given all the stress of the past weeks with the pandemic, with the riots, etc., to get away from it all and have a little bit of fun. But don't worry, the New York Times is here to rain on your parade. Story by Joe Becker. Cruise ships on land as Vegas reopens a huge test for casinos. It was among the last of the big conferences before the coronavirus pandemic shuttered the massive casinos lining the Las Vegas Strip in March. More than 1,000 people gathered at MGM Resort International's Mirage Hotel and Casino for the Women of Power Summit, after organizers of the networking event for executive women of color assured attendees that the risk of attendance was extremely low. That seemed a reasonable bet, given that Las Vegas had yet to record a single coronavirus case. What no one realized was that one of the conference speakers, a New Yorker, had already contracted the virus by the time she landed at McCarran International Airport on March 6th. 2 days later, she was in the hospital. Nevada's case count now stands at more than 9,600, and as of Sunday afternoon, 438 people had died. But the case involving the Women of Power speaker is nowhere to be found in these grim totals, despite the fact that she stayed, tested positive, was hospitalized, and recovered in Las Vegas. That's because the state's coronavirus tally does not include visitors who get sick there or soon after returning home. Instead, only state residents who test positive are counted. If one of the trickiest aspects of containing the pandemic is figuring out when and where people contract the virus and then quickly tracing their contacts, then there is perhaps no place in the nation where that is as tricky a task as in Las Vegas, where last year guests outnumber residents 20-1. Casinos along the Strip last week reopened their doors to a flood of visitors, masked and unmasked, but equally eager to test their luck after a 78-day hiatus. An over-the-top water show set to Elvis's Viva Las Vegas at the Bellagio Hotel marked the occasion, and a marquee sign at the Aria Resort and Casino summed up in Sin City's new social distancing ethos: think dirty thoughts, but keep your hands clean. As Nevada embarks on one of the most epidemiologically complex reopening experiments in the nation, Governor Steve Sisolak says he is confident that every precaution possible has been taken to ensure that the famed resorts can both serve guests and protect public health. Dealers and players are separated by plexiglass. Dice are housed in sanitizer after every throw, and guests, encouraged though not required to wear masks, are subject to mandatory temperature checks. I don't think you'll find a safer place than Vegas, the governor said during a recent call with reporters, but he added that he is closely tracking the state's case numbers and will pull back if it causes any type of problems. Okay, that's about as far as I can go. You can read the rest of the article here with its usual bunch of New York Times nonsense and political agenda. But I just like to ask one question. And that is, how is it that coronavirus is transmitted while playing craps, but it's not transmitted while looting stores? How is that? How is it that it's okay for politicians to be out masked among the rioters, raising their hands, hugging them out in the streets, but that's no cause for concern? The real cause for concern is that the casinos are reopening and money is flowing again to the Silver State of Nevada. That's the real concern. It just doesn't stand a reason. The people are not being fooled anymore by this nonsense. You cannot, on the one hand, claim that flattening the curve is the single most important value we have in the country, and then pass out exemptions by the handful for social unrest. and other things that are A-OK to the politicians who are making these pronouncements. This notion that we're experimenting with reopening the country is utter nonsense. The experiment was in closing it down in the first place. It's something that had never been done in world history. Why would you quarantine the healthy? Why? This virus broke geographic containment sometime around Thanksgiving of last year. It's hard to tell. The Chinese lies make it difficult to be certain. But given the numbers that we're seeing, it was before the holidays. At that point, it was no longer possible to quarantine the healthy and prevent the spread of the virus. So we undertook this experiment at the behest of experts who claimed, based on bogus models, that we were going to be looking at 2.2 million coronavirus deaths in the United States. They were off by a couple of orders of magnitude. Moreover, the numbers that we do have, we arrived at by doing things like taking victims of shootings in Washington state and counting them as corona deaths. You can look it up. The experiment was in seeing how many millions of Americans and people the world over could be suckered into blowing a gaping hole in their own economy. That was what the experiment was. Reopening is an experiment on the part of the Democrat governors to see how long they can continue the con so that their presidential candidate doesn't have to leave his basement and debate anybody. But when we talk about the values in play here, the New York Times values above all a Democrat-run government. They value nothing so much as that. Not the truth. New York Times doesn't give a fig about the truth. Never has. Remember Joe Durante in the 30s when the Ukraine was undergoing a famine because their Soviet masters decided to subjugate the small farmers, the kulaks, by starving them. They took all their food. They were the farmers working the land. They decided to Sovietize, collectivize food production and not give it to the people who were raising it. This created a famine in the Ukraine. Joe Durante, New York Times correspondent, went over and reported that there was no famine, that everything was wonderful in Stalinist Russia. And that was what was reported in the Times. Look up Joe Durante. You'll find he's still a fairly prominent figure in those circles. No doubt because of the good service he made to the commissars. So no, the New York Times has their values, and they make sure that their values come across loud and clear in each and every article. But the American people have our values. And one of those values is that we believe in having fun once in a while. We're one of the hardest working peoples on the planet. If you look at the indicators. But when we want to blow off steam, we blow off some steam. Have to maintain some sort of balance, some sort of mental health. People have been locked up for months. And now it's May. Actually, now it's June. The virus does not do well in the heat and in the sunlight. And people don't catch it easily when they're out in the outdoors. And Las Vegas sits in the desert. It's hot. It's sunny. Casinos are not the most crammed in places you've seen. The folks who are burning their neighbors' businesses to the ground right now are packed in tighter while they're looting and burning and killing than people are working the slot machines. And while our leaders, such as they are, cannot seem to muster so much as a raised eyebrow, either from a spread of the coronavirus perspective or from condemnation at the immorality and evil of burning down your neighbor's business and killing people in the streets for the rioters, well, we have plenty of scorn for the good people trying to have a little bit of fun amidst all of this madness. The jig is up. One of the things you hope to see coming out of this terrific catastrophe is that the American people at last awaken to the hostility those in control of their government and their culture have toward them. The hatred that our would-be rulers evince constantly toward us, and it is reflected in their evil policies. Because it's when the American people once again adopt American values, values like liberty, values like order, values like respect for the law, values like equal justice under the law. It is when we take those values back up that we shall restore our Constitution, and America will return not to the new normal. The new normal by definition is abnormal, but to normal. And I would think after the hellish experience this country has endured over the past several months, a return to normal would be most welcome. Have a great day.